Thank you. Thank you. A little bit about myself. I'm a talent manager at Machinima. If you guys aren't familiar with what that is, it's a YouTube network that's part of Warner Brothers Digital. And what we do is we manage a network of gaming creators to help entertain gaming fan bases, but also to help promote gaming brands and gaming companies' products. So this picture right here is it's an image of our PAX East party at Icon Nightclub in Boston. And I just wanted to start off because I think it's a good representation of what we try to do, which is to basically have a good time and hopefully others will follow. Because, I mean, they can see when you're truly having a good time and when it's entertaining for you, rather than creating something that's a little too formal. So what's an influencer? I'm sure you guys, I mean, we're probably a decade into the era of the influencer. So they can take on various shapes and forms, typically, under 30, male, but each influencer, the beauty is that they have their own audience, and we find that they often reflect they are often reflections of the audiences that they represent. So they do a good job of basically being relatable figures for fans that can't traditionally find that in regular media. So they have more niche-specific audiences. Of course, this isn't a surprise either. It's very similar to the main audience of games. And obviously, like I said, each influencer has their own audience that reflects who they are. But typically, the main consumer of content on YouTube we find is millennial guys 18 to 34. I've personally found it really surprising when I saw this information that actually gaming content is more prolific amongst this demographic, even more so than music, film, sports, tech, really big entertainment searches. This one's not showing up. Oh, it just, I think it clicked out. I think it's dead. There we go. Oh, it's not loading.
Video?
No, it's not a video. It's another slide. It's not popping up. Let me see if it will shuffle to other slides. I mean, it's popping up on here. Should I talk through it, or should I just?
Keep going, and we'll try and help.
Okay. Well, this slide, trying to keep it smooth for you guys. This slide, use your imagination. We split up influencer content into 3 categories, really. I don't know why I'm motioning to the board. There's nothing to see. We would say that they're typically either in the form of entertaining content, educational content, or inspirational content. Entertaining is obviously the most prolific, the most common. And there's usually some sort of variance of comedy or action. Maybe able to work this out. But these can be variations of jokes, reactions, commentary, skits. Also more ambitious content such as live action. There we go. Right, thank you. And what do I do in the future? Just like press it hard.
Start the presentation again.
There we go. A master. So we think that obviously comedic is often the most common. There's also the competitive aspect, really good acts of showmanship. Obviously Ninja is really popular mostly because of how good he is at Fortnite, but we also have under our wing, for example, we have, in our network personally, we have Optic Big Timer and Scumber Jumper, the former Call of Duty world champion and the current Call of Duty world champion, captain of the current world champions, Team Optic. Educational, we think this is really good because these are basically tutorials, how-tos, also updates on like balance changes or new DLC. And we think these videos are particularly effective at attracting new player bases especially games that may be too complex or slightly intimidating for a new viewer or a new fan to really pick up. And finally, inspirational. This is usually the rarest. It's actually hard to find a channel that's completely predicated on purely inspirational content. But when it does come out, it has a really viral since it has the more of the factors that can lend itself to viral growth because it's shareable across gaming genres and even non-gaming genres. And I just want to give a couple examples of some of the influencers we represent that we think really embody these categories. I mean, Dashi, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of him. He's pretty big. His big thing is really just acting, playing his emotions on his sleeve. He's kind of, he's funny mostly because he acts like an alpha. He walks with a swagger, thinking that he's going to get the best of any player, any game that he steps into, but often gets the best of him. And he basically, viewers can live vicariously through him so they don't lose their voices because he shouts a lot. Educational, Houndish, he's actually one of our up-and-coming players. He is a Destiny 2 guru, as I would call him. He's been uploading since the release of the game in September of 2017, but obviously when the initial wave died down, he stuck to it, and it's really come back in anticipation of the Forsaken DLC. He's really seen a resurgence in his content, and Activision has actually really taken him under his wing, which is a good example of how to build relationships with these guys, as I'll get to later. And then this is a clip I'd like to play as an example of, I think, strong inspirational content. Hopefully it will play. Is there a way to split settings? Yeah, that's just going to the next slide. I had it set on autoplay. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Yeah, for some reason we have to do this.
Okay, sure. So.
In games like Final Fantasy, for example,
Technical difficulties. It's all a joke.
Yeah, how are you guys doing? Have you having a good DevGam so far? Ready for the 4 p.m. coffee break? Is that working?
Is this the right slide? No.
No, just keep scrolling over.
in games
There we
like
go.
Final Fantasy, for example, music is a really important factor because the music identifies the area that you're in. What I always try and do is aim for a save point, generally. Oh, I'm in Macedоnia.
So that was a cool documentary that one of our channels, Dan08, made about a blind gamer, and it's a good example of how inspirational, even though it's relatively rare, has the most viral ability because he's actually a very small channel and he does about a few thousand views a video. Through social promotion, we were actually able to get him within 3 million views, even though he only had about 10,000 views in the first week. And what's really good, I think, and super relevant to you guys, is that it served as tremendous PR for companies, for the producers of Injustice 2 and Final Fantasy X because of the props he gave for the dynamic audio cues. In terms of Injustice 2, the footsteps of his character helped him understand where he was on screen. Final Fantasy, the music changes helped him understand what area of the level or what part of the world he was in. And it really had a nice call to action to all of the across fan bases and helped attract a widespread gaming fan base because this is something that is really inspiring and and something that is relatively unknown, that blind gamers do exist, and that if at all possible, it's great to accommodate them. In terms of how to work with them, I'm sure you guys are probably aware of most of these. I'll go over them really quickly. Games, these guys are obviously the captains of your, if you're the general, these guys are the captains of your army, and you really need to give them the resources early and often. Games, I want to make a really good note that I think that the earlier you can help them get a game, the better, because I'll put an analogy of a sports fan is the most optimistic the day before his or her team is about to start the season, right? Because they could go 16-0, they could go 82-0. So it's the best time to strike in terms of getting an influencer that maybe would not normally try the game and get their respective audiences that would normally not watch that type of content to watch something that's emerging and help really take their opinions and their feedback to heart. Events are really good because they help establish an in-person affiliation with that person and your game, but it's also good just to build the relationship. DLC, I think this is also really important and sometimes overlooked, because a lot of publishers or developers will send a game code and then say like, great, hope you enjoy it. But actually even the little things like cosmetics, content packs and patches, getting these to these guys early, I find are really effective because they are the reason why you can have a long tail end of relevancy on your game, right? Because when your game drops, I mean, even on Battletech, every 6 months is pretty good, but I mean, do you really want there to be nothing in between every 6 months? So by giving these guys, even if it's not the actual full version of a content pack, giving them hints, giving them snippets, notes, so they can speculate, commentate, create debate amongst their communities, or really create engagement in those valleys of content. News and clips, I think that's coincides with DLC. And then community tools, this is really important. You want to help them create as engaging content as possible. And something we find is that private servers, so things that allow for custom game types, things that allow them to interact with their fans, and also codes and giveaways to help attract new fans. So private servers are more along the lines of retaining current audience members, codes and prizes for attracting new ones. This is an example. We did early access with Jurassic World Evolution. They provided us codes about a week before launch day, but it was embargoed till the day before. It went really well. I mean, obviously, if you guys know about the game, it launched on June 12th, so that's right at E3. But because they gave it to us early and the day before, we were actually able to help bump their game up on trending on YouTube, even while during E3, while everyone was going to YouTube to watch gaming content. 30-day post-launch, we had 77 videos and 6 million views. That's pretty good. The official Jurassic World YouTube channel, which I thought they did a great job as well. And they also had the advantage of having exclusive, obviously the first live stream, the first character profiles of each dinosaur. But even with their exclusive hub of content, they generate 1.3 million views in the same amount of time. So just by reaching out, sending a couple emails, connecting a couple influencers, we more than quadrupled what they did on their own. The other way, so the early access is the more organic and kind of collaborative buddy-buddy way. The other way is brand activations. This is a better way to attract those high-value influencers, the bigger ones, or the ones that are maybe a little bit more hesitant or less likely to try your game naturally, but it's still a really great way to engage. The top one is a version of KISS, Keep It Simple, Stupid. You can just include, have your game be part of the regularly scheduled content or just a sponsor. Live action, this is good for if you want to, promote physical editions of the game, special editions. Good if you want to incorporate a vlogger to have a more personal endorsement rather than just, gameplay and commentary. Collaborations, I think this one's really great too, because if you feel like your game has crossover or has inspiration from multiple games that are already out there, this is a good way to bring creators that already have audiences of each specific fan base together. And I'll show an example of that later. Machinima, that's the name of our company. That is, in case you guys, I'm sure you guys know, but it's like skits and films within games. And these are also a good way to kind of show off the versatility of your game engine, the beauty of it, and also really honestly to attract younger audiences, because we find that very much younger viewers tend to be attracted to role play content, especially like in Minecraft, Roblox, actually Fortnite now too. So if you want a younger or really like foster an early on fan base, that's a good way. Music and animation, these are obviously more niche, but there are examples. I mean, I have a guy called Miracle of Sound, shout out to him in Ireland. He makes soundtracks inspired off of games that he really loves, and it's a great way for fans of those games to develop a deeper affinity with them, but also for fans of his music to be introduced and potentially try a new game. And animations, I actually want to show you an example right here. Obviously, they're great ways to kind of have a more mainstream audience, because anything cartoonish or animation can approach a more general audience. And I want to show you a clip from Dopa 2. He's one of my partners. He creates a lot of parodies of what it's like to have a specific Overwatch hero on your team or on the other team. And this is a clip he made when Doomfist was introduced.
Don't give up!
But yeah, he's great. And then I just want to go over a really few examples too of some of the examples of the activations. This is a nice blend. This is an example of how like those types that I listed don't have to be mutually exclusive. So this is an example of live action and like regularly scheduled programming. So we had Big Jiggly Panda, one of our partners. He tweeted about while he was at PAX going to the Oculus booth, trying Oculus Rift for the first time. And it really promoted a lot of foot traffic and fan engagement at the booth. But then when he later followed up and posted content on his first full level experience at with an Oculus game, it helped reinforce the fans that saw him there, felt like they had a deeper connection, they got an exclusive opportunity, but also was able to introduce Oculus and the game Workplace Simulator to his audience that wasn't at PAX. This is a good example. The Lenovo Lampards, I think, are a really good example of the collaboration that I mentioned. So we've had a couple different iterations of this, but oftentimes the most recent games that influencers tend to play have been Minecraft, Call of Duty, Fortnite, Dark Souls, Fallout, Battlefield, Gmod. So, you can probably see some overlaps in terms of genre and whatnot, but we were able to get them into a room together and have them play in kind of an exclusive live stream that really brought exposed Lenovo to a wider player base. And it also created this fun competitive and cooperative environment that you don't normally get to see influencers in, because they're often very siloed, right? They're streaming, they're by themselves, maybe they're playing online, but actually you almost create kind of a reality show dynamic of camaraderie and rivalry when you actually put them in a room together.
What are you dragging me into?
Sorry. So, and I just want to give you an example of a more ambitious live action clip that we created with the help of Raka Raka to promote the upcoming Shadow of War game.
What are you dragging me into?
I told you it's an orc fight club where we all dress up in cosplay and fight each other.
I don't like fighting.
It's not real fighting, it's fake, look.
Ow! Gosh, you serious?
Are you here for Fight Club?
Yeah, fight club!
Shut up! Get in!
No, wrong door.
See ya. Oh gosh, what the hell?
we thought this was a good example of how you can use live action to, so in this case you infuse kind of the comedy that normally doesn't necessarily happen in a game that has mostly dramatic overtones, but appeals to a wider audience, and also the fact that it's live action kind of pays tribute to the great Lord of the Rings franchise itself, which can potentially attract fans of the general movie franchise and introduce them to the game. And then I just wanted to finally kind of conclude with the last example of something that we did early access for and a brand activation with, and then kind of show you how the results, the side-by-side comparison. So we did early access for We Happy Few. That launched really recently on August 10th. They were kind enough to give us access about a week before, but it was embargoed until the day before. We did invite several influencers. We ended up getting 10 with 87 videos and 6.7 million views. I will show you the brand activation part in a second. In terms of the activation, we had just 3 influencers. We had a big, Dashy, as I mentioned before, Huts, medium, and Monkey Flop small. This was a lot more focused. They had an unboxing video that actually premiered about a week before the game came out to help build awareness and hype. And then they had a scheduled video on launch day to continue to build awareness and create engagement on launch day. This created 650K views, but because of the brand activation element, there's also a lot of additional data that we hope Gearbox found really, really helpful in terms of understanding what worked and what didn't. Because part of a good aspect of working with these influencers also is to understand who is your audience and who isn't and who can be. So the kind of breakdown of like the 2 basic ways to work with them and what the pros and cons are. Early access, it's low cost, usually no cost, to be honest. It's organic, right? So you won't have any proclamations of sellout, and it's probably more better transition to their everyday content. But there's very little control because they can still say bad things. And it's not necessarily, or even if they say good things, it could be unfocused. It could not really have any call to actions, anything that's really relevant to you, especially if it's just a one-off. And you still actually, this is a small thing, but kind of a big thing actually. Baseline disclosures, technically by FTC, you actually have to disclose that they get the game for free, but they often don't because they're not getting paid, and that can technically get you in trouble. Brand activations, pro, structure, and control. So this is a way that even if it's someone that really likes the game already, you can give them a focus, you can tell them what to mention, a call to action on like how to pre-order or how to whatever. High production value, so you can create things like that Orc Fight Club that I mentioned, like really ambitious things that can have wider audience bases. Legal compliance, like I mentioned, because it will be by the book if you go through a network or a manager, whoever it is, and more data, like I mentioned, so you will understand which influencers truly work, because views aren't everything. I'm sure most of you are familiar, but a view on YouTube is 30 seconds, but that doesn't tell you in terms of how many impressions they got, what their retention rate was, how many shares and how many views through those shares came from. You won't see that just by publicly viewing the YouTube video. Cons, higher costs, obviously these are more intensive, so they come with higher costs, and you will have to disclose a little bit more because they're paid. This is my last slide. I don't know if I got 5 minutes. Keys for lasting relationships. I've already touched base on most of this, but at the end of the day, it's really about short feedback loops. So these guys, sorry, am I blocking you? These guys are, like I keep saying, they're your captains, they're your front line. So you should really listen to them because their opinion matters. I'm not going to name any specific names, but there's been many times where I hear creators say, like, I'm frustrated about X and Y of this game, and then I find out only later that someone from the community listened to them and then installed it in the next year's version of the game. But that takes way too long, and that can detract both the influencer himself, but also the viewers and the fans of the game if you take that long to respond, or you don't publicly respond that you're working on it. And I mean, honestly, I've even seen instances where you can conduct focus groups to really understand what they're thinking. because these guys are the folks with the megaphones, so they're going to be like, even if certain folks don't know about or don't have those opinions, simply by them having those opinions, that can become a wildfire sentiment amongst your community. Access to community perks, obviously you want to help them retain their audiences and also attract new ones, so those are great ideas to kind of keep content fresh, not only for your game, but for them. I mean, you guys know, like, even Ninja has, like, oftentimes his videos will focus on the new skin he's playing in, or your Overwatch, one of the biggest Overwatch channels on YouTube always focuses on a balance change or a new hero, because these are the things that are relevant. And that kind of rolls over to the first mover advantage, because you know, these guys are tastemakers. They want to be the first to try something, get their opinion, but they want a podium, so you have to kind of give them the resources to do so, and they'll feel respected and they'll feel like they're a true ambassador. And finally, cross-promotion. Cross-promotion, this often happens, but not as much as you would think. Obviously, they're always showing, if they really like your game, they're showing you a lot of love and whatnot. But don't be afraid to show love back, because, you know, it's a two-way street. Even if you're big or small, rewarding a content creator that has 1 million views or like 10 views is really good, because they'll feel like, you know, whether it's a tweet or whatnot, they'll feel like they're a respected voice. And event invites, like I mentioned, whether it's an exclusive event or just a little get-together, it's always good to build that personal relationship. And with that, I'll take 1 minute for questions.
So I'd certainly like to start off with a question about understand the value chain of things. As an influencer, they produce these videos. I guess they get to keep any advertising that becomes just the views that they get. But is that the only revenue they get, or do you take a cut off the publishers in order to sort of go through? Who earns money and where does that money come from?
Okay, that's a good question. So there's obviously the ad or media revenue that comes out of it. And depending on the agreement, there's usually some sort of revenue share. The influencer usually gets a lion's share of that. But actually for branded activations, that's a different. There tends to be a larger share that goes through whether it's a personal manager or our network, because we're really facilitating the deal for them and negotiating as well. And those do not have ads running in front of them. So nothing blocks your ad or your sponsor.
And just sort of ballpark, what are the ranges sort of these deals that they have to be? Are they telephone numbers in size? I mean, just a rough idea without any specific figures.
It really depends on who you're working with, right? John on the street that has 1,000 subscribers might be willing to do it for a pat on the back. And then, you know, I don't want to say, but I know a couple influencers where they're so popular that in order to take them an hour away from streaming or a day from video recording, it's like $100,000. So it depends. I would say it's normally, to be a little bit more helpful, I would say it's normally between the 4 and 5 figure range.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Question? Go ahead.
One question I had is, so I actually had two. One is, a lot of the streamers that we see that are actually prolific enough and important enough to actually make a difference in your bottom line have content that their community is looking for with each and every day. And when they do different content, they actually see drop in views. So it actually reduces the interest to try different games. Without necessarily writing a check for the 5 figures that you're talking about. What are methodologies that you can do to actually incentivize people to actually try something different so they don't see the blowback from the people that are actually paying their rent?
That's a great question. I mean, that's honestly a difficulty that content creators have in general. So I know a couple guys that started off a few years ago, for example, doing like NBA 2K content, and now they're like bored of the game, or they want to move on to something new, and they can't branch out. So that's a very difficult conundrum, and there's no magic bullet, to steal a word from my counterpart from before, but I would say that, you know, kind of garnering more of those opportunities in the early access department for them. So showing them footage of the game, letting them try the game privately, right? And if they really like it, then maybe you guys can build a strategy from there. I do also know that a lot of these bigger influencers tend to have a YouTube channel and a Twitch channel, and oftentimes those can actually be different repositories of content. Often the YouTube is usually honestly more siloed, and the Twitch content can be more flavor of the month. So maybe that's a method. And if you truly want to branch out, I mean, honestly, there's never anything stopping an influencer or you from building a new channel. So I've had guys that like, they've always been a closet RPG player, even though they're a shooter player, and they're like, you know, whatever, Cyberpunk 2077 is about to come out, and they want to dedicate a channel to that. There are ways to create a new audience base for that.
My follow-up was kind of in line with that. Is one thing I've seen has been very successful is actually even before early access of giving access privately to people and actually making an incentive to be a part of development to some degree. In terms of difficulties of getting people to incentivize and attracting those people, what are the methods that you would say to reach out towards people to get people involved, even before under NDA of like, we're going to let you and we want to hear your feedback to help us make the game better?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I would say, again, it depends, but it's good to just basically, as soon as you know who you kind of want to work with, to reach out and start those conversations, because it's never really too early. No one's going to be offended to say like, oh, you know, the game is a year away and you're talking to me. You like my community so much, how dare you speak to me, you know? So, you know, it's good to get your foot in the door. Respect their time, of course. So if you're going to invite them to your studio to show them a build, make sure it's good. It's at least a few, maybe probably like 20, 30 minutes of content. And look, if the game is good and they like it, they're yours. So that's what I can say. Anybody else?
Okay, Alan, thank you.
Thank you.